Hi, welcome to the Radical Entrepreneur Show. We are now in a segment where we get to interact with trailblazers, people that are doing phenomenal things, men and women who are exceptional. And we are so privileged to be joined by the exceptional Daniel Kavani, commonly known as DNK, the CEO of DNK Group of Companies. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, the radical one.
I'm so glad to have you. It's so beautiful to have you here.
No, it's good to be here. Been some time, this Corona thing, but it's wonderful to be here.
Beautiful. And you're one of those people that share so much on education. So our discussion will be around education. What role does education play on success?
Well, there is no success where there is no education. Because you see, when a human being is born empty. So everything that you are able to do, you have learned. The process of learning is education. So it is hard to imagine, it is actually impossible to have success without education on any frontier of knowledge. I know when I give a statement like that one, it may sound controversial and people might think I'm overrating education, but that's a fact. You can think of whichever line of success, whichever line of development. If you're going to talk about the hospital, any sound procedure done in the hospital is based on education. If you're going to talk about business, any successful business has a strong education system running behind it. The people that come and work in the company must be educated. That is transfer of knowledge and skills. The person who is managing the company must be educated in management, must be educated in human resource management, financial management. So whether you're thinking of a business, think of farming. When you remove education from farming, farming stops being fun. It becomes persecution. That's what people do in the villages. Okay. There's little education to the farming. So more muscle and sweat comes in. When there is education to the farming, technology displaces the muscle and farming becomes fun. That's why people do selfies at the farm. It's because there's education to it. So education cuts across everything.
Wow, that was quite insightful. Hey, now, how then do you marry those that get to become successful in entrepreneurship? I mean, we've seen a lot of examples of people that have become so rich, so wealthy, and they are not formally educated. Okay. What is your take on that?
So mostly when you say the word education, it seems every person is programmed to equate it to formal education, which follows the systems of grade 1 to grade 7 to anything. And you see, I've often heard people put up arguments such as Bill Gates is not educated. And somebody says Mark Zuckerberg is not educated. And cites a good example. You see, every person must understand, one of the most educated people we have here on earth is Bill Gates. Now, he is self-educated. Because education is not sitting in class. Education is a process that happens to the brain, the mind. Transformation of the mind, acquisition of new information and knowledge and skills, that is education. It can either happen in a formal setting where you sit in class with chalk, board, and a teacher, or it can happen even outside that. You see, the word education comes from, it's Latin, originates from the word sacar, which was a context of philosophers of then who would sit and have apprentices that move around with them as disciples. So you learn from there. Afterwards, you also break out to become your own master. So if you look at the olden days, we would see guys like Aristotle, like Plato, like Socrates, like Gamaliel, and many others. All these guys were teaching their people by apprenticeship. Those days, there were no classes. Every day you go and report yourself at the house of your philosopher whom you are following. As he's talking to people, knowledge and wisdom is rubbing off to you. At some point when you begin to speak with wisdom, you are weaned off. You have also become a master of your own. So, but then with time, education began to be formalized, more especially as we move later on in the 80s and later on towards the Industrial Revolution, education began to be formalized into schools to attend to specific industries because of the industrialization that was happening. So we have moved that way. But I'm saying education is not what happens in class. It is what happens in the brain, in the mind.
So it is very fine and very, but how do you explain
Look at
that?
an example of, let me cite the example of Bill Gates, okay? Or let me cite an example. For example, Bill Gates reads in excess of 5 books in a month. I have also seen Mark Zuckerberg and how much he reads. He shares this actually on his thing. These guys that people think have not gone to school, yes, they have not gone to school, but they are highly educated. They are loaded with information. Information is what gives man a competitive advantage. When you see Bill Gates doing fine, he has certain information which has come by a process of self-education, which the competitors don't have. That is what makes him to see opportunities where others can't. That is what brings in efficiency in how he uses resources, which others cannot do. So education gives you efficiency. It also gives you an extra eye to see opportunities that an eye that is not educated cannot see.
Well, that is that is interesting. So does that then mean in our African setup or Zambian setup, where we have people who are not learned, you know, like in the formal education, like you've already indicated, but these people are not learned to a point that, you know, they can't really read in this informal education. So now, how do you marry the two? One who is not learned and cannot read on their own, but we've seen, especially in the field of entrepreneurship, I mean, if you are to look at it from that angle, we see these people successful, running huge transport companies, you know, running, you know, having a number of hotels and whatnot. So how do we marry that?
You know, we think these people are not educated because we think education is English. English is a language. It is not education. That's why Chinese don't speak English, but they are here commanding your engineers that speak English. So education is not English. So the guy who runs trucks might not speak English, but is educated. It is possible to be educated and unable to speak English. So if we are going to use the parameters of judging who is educated by how eloquent one is, we miss the mark. Because education has little and close to nothing to do with English. So some of these guys don't speak English, but they're educated. In which sense? You see, there are 2 ways in which man learns. Either you learn by formal education of reading the books, or you learn by experience, which is experiential learning, which can come by association. So if you have stopped school in grade 7, but you begin to work for a transport company where you are employed as a driver, while you are there, the other person is just excited about crossing over to Zimbabwe, and there he has a girlfriend, then crossing over the other side. The other guy who is seated there is always asking himself questions. Yes, but boss, where do you buy these trucks? When your boss tells you where he buys his trucks, education has happened. Acquisition of new information. How do you clear these trucks on the border? That's education. It doesn't require English. Because the border you might be crossing is Mozambique, where they don't even speak English. Okay? So how do you prepare a quotation? That is education. How do you write an invoice? That is education. So you're going to go to a businessman who does not speak English but knows how to write an invoice. I can bet you that a graduate from the University of Zambia cannot prepare an invoice.
Wow.
He has learned the English, he has learned the theories, he has not learned one thing which is critical to the business world, generating invoices. But a guy who has never set foot in the university can write that. Who is educated between the two? So education is beyond English. It is beyond past papers. Education, like I've said, is knowledge acquisition. So if you find a person that you think is not educated but is successful, that person is educated. Just examine his knowledge base. You're going to realize that his knowledge base is above any person who has not succeeded as him within that sphere.
Wow. I think that is quite...
So I'm an advocate of, actually, you see, much as I'm an advocate of formal education because it creates a workforce. for the industrial world. That is very important because there are areas in which you need certain expertise to work in, right? And the formalization of education has excluded apprenticeship. Now you can't apprentice as a doctor, then go to the hospital to say, you see, I used to visit this doctor. Now can I also be a doctor? But there are still many industries that are opening up, and those that are present now that don't need formal education. But informal education acquired through experience and interaction can fit in there with the skills to do the work.
What role has education played in your success as an entrepreneur in this case?
Okay, so for me, number one, I think it's the shaping of the mindset. Like I said, education opens your eyes. You see, when people are not educated, they have, for example, let me first create that, one of the things that makes people to be risk averse, okay, it is actually ignorance. When you are ignorant about something, you fear it. People fear the dark because they are ignorant of what lies in the dark. People fear death because they do not know what death holds. The more you know about something, the less you become afraid. So one of the things you're going to realize is that in entrepreneurship, for you to succeed, you must have a healthy appetite for risk. But you see, a health appetite for risk is not just an impulsive feeling of saying, now I'm courageous, I'm willing to take risks. You will become an example of what should not be done by those who are coming behind you.
Interesting.
So the health risk and ability to take risk comes because one is informed. You know that there are people who fear to cross the border and go in Zimbabwe and trade. Why do they fear? It is the ignorance of what is in Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. There are people who fear going to South Africa to do business. Why do they fear? The ignorance of what South Africa holds. But education begins to open your mind to know that some of the things you're afraid of, you should not be afraid of. Some of the things you think you should not attempt, you can actually attempt. So one of the advantages education has given me is now ability to risk, because I'm risking from an informed point of view.
Wow.
So you have counted the cost. The other thing is this. Maybe now talking of formal education, the benefit of formal education, the one where people go to university, is this. It is not simply for the sake of getting a job. It is also for the sake of creating a network. A network that has buying power. If you dropped in grade 3, and the majority of your friends also dropped in grade 3, chances are little that they are middle income earners or high income earners. If you started a business, it means therefore the people that can buy from you are people who are low income earners. A person who has gone to university and then he goes to start a business, the people that he sells to will most likely be more middle income earners or high income earners, which makes his business easy to thrive. But also, these people tend to move into positions of influence. For example, by virtue of me having gone through the university, I have friends at Force Headquarters, and my friends at Force Headquarters will not be the ones slapping and saluting people. Mm-hmm. They'll be the ones who are in charge. So if I need to do some work with the Force Headquarters, it means I'm tapping in a higher network. Yeah. I'll have friends at hospitals. It means my friends at hospitals are most likely not at the rural health posts. Mm-hmm. They are at the specialized hospitals, at the general hospitals. When I'm sick, it means I'll get a better service. That's the advantage of education. It gets you into a network that is in charge of maybe the economy, so to say.
Well, this is very interesting, and this conversation was really worthwhile, and I can tell that there is a lot of information where this has come from. Our wish is that you come back on this set again, but for now we have to let DNK go. Please, thank you for joining the Radical Entrepreneur Show. Join me on the other side.